Hey guys, how you doing here today? This is David Lucas back here again. Welcome back to my channel. Now today I'm coming back at you guys again for another edition into the Spider-Man review. Yes guys, we are almost here now, basically on the home stretch of the Spider-Man review. Literally about like a week, almost a week and a half away from Spider-Man No Way Home. It's crazy to think that it's already here. Hope you all got your tickets already because it's gonna be hard to get tickets on opening night. But that all being said, we are here now back onto the Spider-Man series, and now since we just reviewed and finished the Amazing Spider-Man series, we are now onto the Spider-Man Homecoming series, or the Spider-Man MCU series. Yes guys, we are here now at Spider-Man Homecoming. Oh, I've been waiting for this one, guys. I've been really waiting for this one for a while. Spider-Man Homecoming is honestly one of my favorite Marvel movies, one of my favorite MCU movies. And I'm being honest, as a Spider-Man fan, as a Spider-Man comic book fan for like a really long time. Again, if you guys know my videos, he's my number 2 guy. It's Batman and Spider-Man. My two main guys are Batman and Spider-Man. Probably is the movie that I rewatch the most out of the Spider-Man movies is Spider-Man Homecoming, definitely. But still, every time I watch it, I love just rewatching and watching it. This one is probably, Spider-Man Homecoming probably is my favorite Spider-Man movie, I gotta say. My favorite live-action Spider-Man movie, I have to say. It is definitely, so far, it is my favorite. To me, as a Spider-Man comic book fan, this one just hits all the notes for me. Now, if you guys are new to this channel, with my reviews, I usually start out with the good into the movies, and then I go on to the bad. So, as always, guys, let's start out with the good in this movie, and let's just get into what I love so much about this movie. Right off the bat, something I really did notice in this movie, and something that really got my attention, I remember when I first saw it in the theater and everything like that, was the whole, basically, how it starts out with Peter making a vlog and vlogging the events of Civil War. Yeah, Civil War happened before this. This is when we were first introduced to Tom Holland, was in Civil War, and Captain America Civil War. I was thinking about reviewing that one, but then I decided, I was like, because it's not fully a Spider-Man movie, he's only in like a couple minutes of the movie, so I decided not to do that. But we start out with him vlogging all that, his whole adventure, and I just sit here and think, and I'm like, you know what? That is something that Peter Parker would do. That is 100% Peter Parker right there, and I love that. I love that whole beginning of him doing it, and I thought it really fit and really worked really well, in my opinion. Something, too, is that I really noticed about this movie that I really love is Michael Giacchino's theme of this movie. Now, I know Hans Zimmer did a little bit in Amazing Spider-Man, and then Danny Elfman, I believe, did the Sam Raimi Spider-Man movie themes. And they were all pretty good, except for the Amazing Spider-Man 2. Did not like Amazing Spider-Man 2, but all the rest of them that were pretty good, in my opinion. I thought really were pretty good. But this theme, just the overall tone and just the way how it goes. Spider-Man does whatever a spider can. It just is Spider-Man, and puts you in feelings like, yeah, I'm in a Spider-Man movie, and that theme puts you into that. And Michael Giacchino, he's really getting up there to be one of my favorite kind of, movie theme artists, I think, recently, because he's doing great. He's been doing a lot, and now he's the one that's doing the Batman, which I love. I love the theme to the Batman that he's doing, and honestly, this is probably one of my favorite. I did love Danny Elfman's theme and the Sam Raimi Spider-Man movies. They did have a great theme, but I don't know, something about this theme, Michael Giacchino's theme, it just puts me in the spirit of Spider-Man. It makes me want to read a Spider-Man comic book. It makes me want to watch Spider-Man TV shows. It just makes me really excited about Spider-Man. So that's just why I really love the theme to this. The overall tone of this movie, too, again, is a Spider-Man feeling tone. It's like a hopeful, more joyful theme. Yes, I know a lot of people did like how the Sam Raimi ones and the Amazing Spider-Man ones did get a little bit darker. They were more darker theme to it. Some people prefer that because Spider-Man did have darker themes in the comic books, definitely, so I'm okay with that. But this kind of tone reminds me of the original Steve Ditko and Stan Lee comic book type of feeling when you're reading those comic books. The overall look of it all and the overall feeling of when you're reading it, it gives you that feeling. It gives you that hopeful, joyful feeling where you're just like, it makes you feel good, and it doesn't make you feel down. It doesn't make you feel depressed. I mean, there are scenes. There are some really good, emotional, impactful scenes in here that get you like, But it's the overall tone of this movie, I think, really works. And it does remind me a lot, actually, of the first Sam Raimi Spider-Man movie. It has that kind of tone going to it, but more modern. And I really like that a lot. Something, too, I want to get onto is that something that is a big complaint I hear about a lot of people with this movie. It's something that I always hear, and it always scratches my head, and it makes me think, like, did you people really watch the movie, or you just didn't watch the movie? Because a lot of people complaining this that there's too much Tony Stark, and I don't get it. Like, I really don't get it. When I'm watching this movie, I'm like, no, he's in here a perfect amount. He's in a little bit of the beginning to kind of tell him, all right, Civil War's over, because we're taking off place right after Civil War, so we're going to lead in right after that, which works perfectly fine. And then he gives him his suit, which I think works perfectly in this universe, in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. We're looking at this Peter Parker and how all the heroes have gotten their suits in the Marvel Cinematic Universe and how it all works. It makes sense to me that, yeah, Stark would make him his suit and give him a suit like how it did in Civil War. I thought it made perfect sense, and I think that was fine. That works. A little bit of him, mentoring him and lecturing him, which is fine. And the thing is that's cool too, is that when you actually go into Spider-Man comic books and you actually read Spider-Man comic books, Spider-Man, a lot of times, for heck's sakes, he was literally introduced in a Fantastic Four comic book. That was the very first comic book Spider-Man ever was introduced for, and was a Fantastic Four comic book. Johnny Storm and all of them kind of was, and Reed Richards, they kind of were mentoring him. They were kind of the roles of what Tony Stark is. They were those roles. They were the heroes, the older heroes that were mentoring this younger guy that's coming in. And it worked, and that's how Spider-Man was introduced in the comic books originally. So in the MCU, they pretty much do the same thing, which I think works really good, and it's something different, and it's something I really love about this movie, is that everything is different about this. They're not doing copy and paste what the Sam Raimi ones did. They're not doing copy and paste what the Amazing Spider-Mans did. They are not doing a straight copy and paste of the comics, but they're taking the spirit of the comic books and the feeling of the comic books, and they're putting it in there, and they're doing it right. And I feel like that works with Tony Stark being in here, because you're putting that spirit of, okay, here's a younger hero coming in, and now here's his older hero mentor coming in and kind of mentor him around just a little bit to give him his feet. But at the end of the day, this is a Spider-Man movie. Spider-Man is the one who saves the day. He is the one that finds the villain, who takes down the villain, who we see throughout the whole movie, basically, is Spider-Man. So this is a Spider-Man movie. It's not a Tony Stark and Spider-Man movie with Spider-Man being a sidekick. No, this is a Spider-Man movie with Tony Stark only appearing to mentor him like the Fantastic Four did in the comics. And it works perfect to me. Something I really love too is that what I love about this movie that makes me so happy is that we finally see him be a friendly neighborhood Spider-Man. Now, I know in the first Sam Raimi movies, and I mentioned this in my review, we did have a little taste of that with the whole montage of him saving the city, saving people in the city, and the people in the city talking about him. We had a little bit of that, and I liked it, but that was really pretty much it. But this, throughout the whole movie, the whole point of the movie, the whole plot of what Stark is trying to get over his head is be the friendly neighborhood Spider-Man. I just love that scene of after when he gets out of school, then he puts on his costume and he starts swinging through the city. And then we see that scene of him, capturing the dude, taking his bike and saying, hey, this anybody's bike? And then leaves a note on there saying from Spider-Man or from Spidey. And then we see him, helping a lady cross the street, and then gives him a churro at the end of the day, and he's eating a churro. That right there is Spider-Man. That is the Spider-Man comic book that I always wanted to see. That is what Spider-Man is. That funny scene of him accidentally, arresting the wrong dude who's just trying to get into his car that he locked himself out of, and Spider-Man thinks he's stealing the car, and then everybody's yelling at him. It's like, hey, he didn't steal the car, blah, blah, blah. It adds to the fact how some people don't like him, while some people see him as a pest and a menace, because sometimes he screws up, and he maybe arrests or takes out the people who aren't really doing anything wrong, so that's why some people don't like him. I just love that we're finally getting that friendly neighborhood Spider-Man feeling, and it makes me really happy. And just I want to mention too, quick, before I get off of this subject, that one shot of him sitting on the rooftop and then him looking over with the mask half off and him eating a churro on his phone, and you see the city in the back. I mean, like, that right there, that's a shot straight out of a Spider-Man comic book. And when I see that, Shane, I sometimes need to pause it and just look at it and be like, that is beautiful. That's awesome. I love it. Now, let's get on to Tom Holland as Spider-Man and Peter Parker. Alright, there's no way other to say it. He is the perfect Peter Parker and Spider-Man together. He is the perfect. Out of Andrew Garfield and Tobey Maguire, Tom Holland is Peter Parker. He's straight up Peter Parker. He's a dorky, nerdy kid who's a genius too, who goes to high school, and I love the overall story of him going to high school and that he has to deal with everyday problems, because that is something that Stan Lee said countless times about Spider-Man and Peter Parker, is that he is just a normal kid who so happens to have powers. And he goes through everyday life. He's in high school, has to deal with going to homecoming, has to deal with hanging out with friends, has to deal with going to high school parties, has to deal with having a crush on a girl and trying to express his feelings, to spend time with the girl. He has to deal with getting his homework done in school. And on top of that, he's dealing with trying to capture the Vulture and being Spider-Man and dealing with all the Spider-Man stuff. And on top of that, he's dealing with wanting to be an Avenger. There's so much that he's going through, but at the same time, at the end of the day, he is still Peter Parker. He is still a friendly neighborhood Spider-Man, as he's Peter Parker and as he's Spider-Man. And then when he's Spider-Man, he is goofy, he throws out jokes, he throws out lines, he messes with the criminals, he goes at them. I love that scene when he's with all the criminals. He goes, whoa, the Avengers, and stuff like that when they have their mask on, all that stuff. I really like that. And even down to the point of him messing up sometimes when he's Spider-Man. When he's Spider-Man and he messes up and screws up, I'm like, yeah, that's Spider-Man. That was Spider-Man when he was younger. He messed up a lot. He had times where he would screw up because he isn't perfect. He's just a kid starting out to be a hero, you know? And I just love how they add all this to him. They have so much actually layers of who Peter Parker and Spider-Man is, and they put it on here with almost so much ease. And I feel like some people don't really notice that or feel like they forget about it. But to me, that's why Tom Holland is the perfect Peter Parker and perfect Spider-Man, because he goes through all this stuff. Something that really stood out to me, too, that I always have to mention, a scene that always stands out to me where it makes me go like, yeah, this is the perfect Spider-Man, is with that party scene. When he's at the party, and, you know, they all want him to kind of, like, you know, be the clown, like, you know, show up as Spider-Man. But that's what Ned wants. Ned wants him to show up and be Spider-Man and all. Then he's about to do it. But during the whole time, he's, like, really complaining. And he's like, I don't know. Like, this is not what I want to do. This is not what I want to be. I don't want to be some kind of, you know, party entertainment type of thing. He hears danger. He hears some commotion going on. And immediately he clicks in a gear, and then he goes off and tries to save the day. I think that is a really cool kind of add-on. It's like, yes, that is Spider-Man. So I gotta say, yeah, Tom Holland is my favorite Peter Parker and Spider-Man. He is my favorite. He is my top guy. He is the guy I look at when I read comic books and I read the pages of the comic books and look at it. It is him. It is him in his suit, his costume, and everything. That is him. Also, really love the whole high school scent, too. That's something, if you guys know, a big complaint I had for both of the Spider-Man series that came out before this, was that everyone looked like adults, and everyone were adults in high school. It was so weird and so distracting that everyone was adult. Even the teachers, for God's sakes, looked to be the same age as them. But in this, when you have that shot of Peter getting off his bus and he's going through the hallways of school, it's like, this is what it looked like in 9th grade. This is what it looked like in, like, you know, high school for me. When I was in high school, everyone looked like kids, and then the teachers looked like actual adults. They looked like actual teachers. And down to the supporting cast, too. I really love the whole supporting cast in this, and I know some people will take an issue that they aren't the main supporting cast that we're used to in Spider-Man movies. But to me, I'm fine with it. I am fine with the change because that is something I really liked. I love his his friendship with Ned. It's very different than his friendship with Harry. And I really like that. I like how they're not trying to just replace him as being Harry. They're actually making a different, new friendship out of this guy, and I like it a lot. And I know a lot of people complain about Zendaya, but I actually enjoy her in this movie. I think her role works. I think it's good for the progression of what we find out for her to be when she ends up becoming MJ. I really like that. It really made me interested. I was like, oh, okay. It's a little bit different. You know, we're not using Mary Jane. We're using Michelle Jones. So MJ. I'm okay with that. I'm completely fine with that. Let's do something different. Let's add something different, but still keep it the same as the comic books. And I feel like even though her name's not Mary Jane, she's still, in a way, now not fully yet, because we're going to get into in Far From Home, but she does. I feel like I like the seeds that are planted of her being MJ and her having that relationship with Peter and the relationship growing, especially at the ending. I love that seed right there that is planted, and it's planted throughout the whole movie, and I really like that because I think that's an interesting way to be like, okay, I can see where this goes into becoming the Mary Jane and Peter relationship, which already makes me more happier than what I could say about Kirsten Dunst and Peter Parker when they were Mary Jane and Peter Parker in the beginning. This is better, to me, this is already better than their relationship. Also like the change too of Marissa Tomei. I also like her change of her being, a younger, more kind of relatable Aunt May. I think it works. Yeah, in the Ultimate Comics there was a younger Aunt May. I mean, she wasn't like young as Marissa Tomei, but she was a more kind of younger, a little bit more kind of not as the old grandma Aunt May. I mean, she actually looked like an aunt. And I really like that. If you guys know my reviews, I said I really like the Sally Field Aunt May. I really like her. I think she's one of the perfect Aunt Mays. But I really do like Marissa Tomei. Is different, yes, but at the same time, she still feels like an actual aunt. She feels like an aunt of this younger Peter Parker, which I can see, again, growing into eventually becoming the older Aunt May that we all know. Now on to some of my favorite things of the movie. And that is Michael Keaton's Vulture. Right off the bat, I just want to say, Michael Keaton's Vulture is no doubtably probably my favorite Spider-Man villain in all the Spider-Man movies. Yes, I'm going to say right now, he is my favorite villain in all the Spider-Man movies. I love what they did with him. And yes, again, he is not a kind of direct origin from the comic books to the real life. But at the same time, it captures the feeling. It captures what Vulture was in the comics, of what Adrian Toomes stood for in the comics. And they do it perfectly in here, while giving him some depth and some story and some humanity now. In this, you actually have a person who you kind of feel for. You have a person who you're relatable, who someone like I can see maybe even being like my own dad, or something like that. Like some average American worker. You can see that as this Vulture. Here comes a big shot billionaire and his crew companies coming in and taking that all over and then leaving these guys into the dust with nothing. So what do? Well, I'm going to take it back to the big guy. They want to do that to me. Okay, I'm going to take a punch back at you then. And that's pretty much what he's doing. He's a vulture. He's like a scavenger almost. He's like a kind of a guy who's grabbing the scraps, grabbing the government scraps, all their leftovers, which you see a lot of people in real life do, and we don't necessarily call them villains or bad people. We see them do that in real life. We see them in movies all the time where we're rooting for those people. And that is Vulture in here, where he's almost, you're like, damn, you are supporting, yeah, you're doing it in some dirty sense, because you see him kill people, and then he's selling, at the top of that, he's selling weapons of mass destruction to people who are going to use that to hurt other people. In that one scene when he figures out, now a scene that I love so much is when he figures out that Peter is Spider-Man. Like, Michael Keaton just nails his performance. Michael Keaton, he's a fantastic, I love Michael Keaton. He's Batman, he's everything. I love Michael Keaton. And I love that scene, how the light is turning to, and the whole cinematography, how the light is turning green as he figures out, and is green all on his face, and he's smiling, and he's like, good old Spider-Man. I just really love the Vulture, and especially the ending, how he captured him and everything like that, and just the way how he was sitting down and kind of looking when he was all captured and tied up by Spider. This reminded me of a panel of a Spider-Man comic book, and that's this whole movie, is that it reminds you of a Spider-Man comic. And another thing too, about the villains, I really like how they introduced the villains. I feel like this time around, they introduced villains in the perfect way, because you guys know my issues with the original Spider-Mans. When they introduce too much villains, they don't do it good, and I don't have a problem with introducing a lot of villains because it works. You can put a lot of villains in a movie and make it work. It definitely does. In this movie, in my opinion at least, I feel like they make it work perfectly by putting multiple villains in. Kind of, you put lesser known villains kind of in like the side, like Shocker, you know, a little bit lesser villain. Shocker in the comic books was always just a hitman. He never was a big time leader villain. He was a hitman villain, you know, so let's put him in Vulture's crew. Let's put him a crew member in there and then plant the seed of him coming in. We have a little bit of Scorpio in here. Scorpion. Well, the seeds plant a Scorpion, which a guy, he has a little bit of Scorpion tattoo on him, which makes you go like, oh, he's going to eventually become Scorpion down the line. We're just introducing him right now, but down the line, he's going to become Tinkerer too. They added a little bit of Tinker in here, and he played, again, just a little henchman villain, a little villain that's in the sidelines, and they put him in a perfect line here. We're not giving him too much depth, not too much, you know, a story building around him that we're supposed to feel something. They are just little minor villains that are planted seeds in that you see are going to eventually grow and become something later on in this universe. And I think that works perfectly. I think that's the better way they did it, better than any of the other villains that they did in any of the other movies, I feel like. One final thing I gotta say that I love about this movie is that I gotta say that this movie does feel like a Spider-Man movie right from the comic books, and they do it perfectly. It is a straight up Spider-Man, read from the comic books, take the pages and put it in here. And to me, I feel like it works perfectly in that. Down to the point of when Spider-Man, when he does learn to become Spider-Man, and he has that with great power comes responsibility moment that we usually always have in here, but it's done differently. It's done more in with Tony Stark kind of telling him, he's like, if you're nothing without that suit, then you shouldn't have it. Like, that is the point of Spider-Man. Spider-Man is not the suit. He's not all the gadgets. He's not all that stuff. He is who is in there. He is who's in that heart. I love that scene when he's stripped down of all his Stark, you know, suit. He's in his old kind of Scarlet Spider type of suit he's in there with, and then he gets all the crumbles all over him, rubble all over him, and he's crying, he's screaming for help, and then he just keeps on going, come on, Spider-Man. Come on, Spider-Man. Come on, Spider-Man. And he remembers what Tony Stark is saying. If you're nothing without that suit, then you're not Spider-Man. I love that scene of him. That's when he realized, like, this is Spider-Man. And he pulls it up, and I'm like, yes, this is right from the comic books. See, if you should go in the comic books, it's a scene directly from there. And it works so perfectly, and it gives you that feeling from the comic books in here, and is putting that feeling up there when he's lifting up, and then you see the image of the split image of him, of Peter Parker and Spider-Man. It is so perfect, and is what makes this movie so great to me, and why I love Spider-Man Homecoming. I love Spider-Man Homecoming. My only complaints that I gotta say of this movie, because I do love this movie, is that maybe the action scenes could have done a little bit better. They maybe could have done the action scenes a little bit better, because that is something with past Spider-Man movies, is that a lot of action scenes are very memorable and very kind of like, you look back on them like, whoa, I remember those. These action scenes, it's not that they're bad. It's not that they're bad at all. But you kind of forget about them. You kind of like, oh yeah, okay. They're a little boring in my opinion. They're very boring. They're not as good as I would hope them to be for Spider-Man action scenes. And that's pretty much it. And also, I kind of wish they maybe would have introduced the Spidey senses a little bit in here, because you do notice that there is no Spidey sense, and there's no Spidey sense going on. There's certain scenes where you think he should be using a Spidey sense, and he doesn't. And I get it. He's young. He's just starting out. He probably doesn't know what they are yet. I get it, but I don't know. I guess maybe I wish there was a little bit of reference in here. But that's pretty much it for all my negatives of it and my positives, guys. That's pretty much my whole thoughts on Spider-Man Homecoming, in my opinion. So in my opinion, Spider-Man Homecoming is definitely my favorite Spider-Man movie. My favorite live-action Spider-Man movie, I should say. To me, it is a Spider-Man movie. You take the Spider-Man comic books and you put it in live action. This is Spider-Man. Tom Holland, in my opinion, is both Peter Parker and Spider-Man. He nailed both the parts beautifully, in my opinion. I love the suit in here. I love the overall tone and feeling of this movie. The villains are definitely the best Spider-Man villains, I think, out of all the Spider-Man movies, in my opinion. I love how we get a little bit of Stark in here and a little bit of the Avengers universe, the greater Avengers universe, because to me, that feels like a Spider-Man comic book. And at the same time, at the end of the day, it is a true Spider-Man movie, because Spider-Man is the one
who saves the day and has the big character development at the end of the day. To me, Spider-Man Homecoming is definitely a great, fantastic Spider-Man movie that I watch on repeat all the time. So guys, my overall scoring, which I'm going to have to give Spider-Man Homecoming, oh, I can't wait for this one, is an 8.5 out of 10. Yes, guys, an 8.5 out of 10. I got to give Spider-Man Homecoming. I love Spider-Man Homecoming. It is definitely one of my favorite Spider-Man movies. Yeah, I have a little bit of issues with it, but at the end of the day, I love Spider-Man Homecoming. I absolutely love it. This is my Spider-Man movie. This is the Spider-Man movie that I've been waiting for a long time. This is the one that I love so much. I love the Spider-Man universe. I love everything about this movie pretty much. So it's definitely one of my favorite MCU movies too. It's up there as my favorite, one of my top 10 MCU movies in my opinion. Next time, we are finally at Spider-Man Far From Home. And then right after that, guys, we are here at Spider-Man No Way Home. Let me know down in the comment section below, and let me know your thoughts on Spider-Man Homecoming, guys. I'm really interested in all your guys' thoughts. And of course, if you guys like this video, make sure you give it a thumbs up, because it really does help a lot. It really helps this channel grow, and really helps this channel get out there a lot. Lately, I've been noticing you guys have been liking this channel a lot, and it's been getting this channel out a little bit, out there a little bit. So I really appreciate it, all your support all the time, guys, from the bottom of my heart. You guys rock. Remember, guys, if you're nothing without that suit, then you shouldn't have it.